You won't believe how the bloodline of one of the grandest empires in the world now survives on pennies. But who is she? And how did it all end? The Mughal Empire, founded in 1526 by Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, rose to prominence as one of the most powerful and prosperous empires in history. Under rulers like Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb, it expanded its territories across the Indian subcontinent, fostering a rich cultural synthesis of Persian, Central Asian, and Indian traditions. At its peak, the Mughal Empire controlled approximately 24% of the world's economy and boasted a military of 1 million soldiers, ruling over 160 million subjects. Its architectural marvels, such as the Taj Mahal and Red Fort, stand as enduring symbols of its grandeur. But even the grandest empires don't last forever. The rise of the British East India Company further accelerated the empire's disintegration, reducing its influence to a mere shadow of its former glory by the mid-19th century. The decline of the Mughal Empire accelerated after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, as weak successors, internal conflicts, and external invasions by the Marathas, Afghans, and Persians eroded its power. The empire's military, once formidable, failed to modernize, while economic exploitation and political manipulation by the British East India Company further weakened its foundations. The final blow came during the 1857 rebellion, when Indian sepoys and civilians rallied around Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, declaring him their leader. However, the rebellion was crushed by the British, leading to the capture of Delhi and Zafar's exile to Rangoon in 1858. His sons and grandsons were executed, marking the end of the Mughal dynasty. But what happened to his family after his exile is something history rarely talks about. Before her marriage to Mirza Muhammad Bahadur Bakht, Sultana Begum's life was shrouded in obscurity, with little known about her early years. She belonged to a family that traced its lineage back to the Mughal emperors, specifically to Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last ruler of the Mughal dynasty. However, by the time of her birth, the once mighty empire had already crumbled, leaving its descendants in poverty and obscurity. Sultana's family lived in humble conditions, far removed from the grandeur of their ancestors. Her upbringing was marked by financial struggles, and she likely grew up in an environment where the tales of Mughal glory were overshadowed by the harsh realities of daily survival. Despite her royal lineage, she had no access to the wealth or privileges that once accompanied her family name. Her life took a significant turn when she married Mirza Muhammad Bahadur Bakht, the great-grandson of Bahadur Shah Zafar. This marriage connected her more directly to the Mughal legacy, though it did little to alleviate her family's financial hardships. Bahadur Bakht himself lived a modest life, relying on a small pension from the Indian government, which barely sustained the family. Sultana's marriage to him marked the beginning of her lifelong struggle to preserve the dignity of a lineage that once ruled one of the world's greatest empires. But how did royal blood end up counting pennies? The answer lies in what happened to her husband. Mirza Muhammad Bahadur Bakht, the great-grandson of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, carried the weight of a once mighty dynasty on his shoulders. Born into a lineage that once ruled over much of the Indian subcontinent, Bahadur Bakht grew up amidst the remnants of royal pride, dreaming of restoring the lost glory of his ancestors. However, the reality of post-independence India offered little room for such aspirations. Despite his royal heritage, he lived in relative obscurity, relying on a modest pension granted by the Indian government as recognition of his lineage. Bahadur Bakht's marriage to Sultana Begum was a union of two individuals clinging to the fading echoes of their royal past. Together, they navigated the challenges of a life far removed from the opulence of their ancestors, raising 6 children in a small, cramped home in Kolkata. The pension, though meager, provided a semblance of stability, but it was a far cry from the wealth and power once associated with the Mughal name. But after her husband's death, life would take a cruel turn for Sultana. After her husband Prince Mirza Badar Bakht's death in the 1980s, Sultana Begum's life took a sharp turn into hardship. Left with 6 children to support, she found herself in a relentless struggle for survival. Her husband's modest pension, which had barely sustained the family, was reduced to just a few hundred rupees, plunging her deeper into poverty. She resorted to running a tea stall and sewing garments, but these efforts yielded little income, forcing her to rely on a meager monthly pension of 6,000 rupees to make ends meet. Sultana now lives in a small, crumbling 2-room hut in a Kolkata slum, sharing a kitchen with neighbors and washing at a communal tap. The irony of her situation is stark. Descended from a lineage that once ruled India and built iconic monuments like the Taj Mahal, she now battles daily to afford basic necessities. Her plight has drawn occasional media attention and sympathy from activists, but it has done little to alleviate her poverty. But what about her children? Did they carry the legacy forward or fall into the same pit of poverty? Despite their royal lineage, her children have struggled to escape the cycle of financial hardship. Her unmarried daughter, Bahadur Begum, lives with her and helps manage their modest household, while her other daughters, also financially strained, are unable to provide much support. Sultana has spent decades appealing to the government for assistance, emphasizing the irony that India profits from Mughal-era monuments like the Taj Mahal and Red Fort, while descendants of the dynasty live in destitution. Although she received temporary aid in 2003, including a cash grant and an apartment, local goons forced her out of the property, leaving her to return to a Kolkata slum. Despite her struggles, Sultana dreams of creating a small memorial for Bahadur Shah Zafar, honoring his legacy as India's last Mughal emperor. She continues to fight for recognition and justice, not just for herself, but for the forgotten descendants of one of history's greatest dynasties. And now, after decades of silence, here's what Sultana is still fighting for. Sultana Begum, the widow of Mirza Muhammad Badar Bakht, the great-grandson of Bahadur Shah Zafar, has spent years fighting for justice and recognition of her lineage. Her legal battles, including a recent appeal to the Delhi High Court seeking possession of the Red Fort, have been dismissed due to procedural delays, leaving her claims unaddressed. Her appeals highlight the stark contrast between the grandeur of the Mughal Empire and the poverty of its last descendants. Sultana's story is a poignant reminder of how empires can crumble, leaving their heirs to grapple with obscurity and hardship. She continues to seek justice, hoping for acknowledgement of her family's legacy and rightful inheritance. Is this how all empires end? Or will someone finally hear Sultana's voice? History isn't always about grand palaces. Sometimes it's about forgotten faces. Sultana Begum's story is a stark reminder of how the echoes of empires can fade into obscurity, leaving their descendants to struggle in silence. Her fight for recognition and justice raises important questions about how we honor the past and those who carry its legacy. What do you think? Should forgotten royals be helped? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love uncovering the untold stories hidden in history, don't forget to subscribe for more.